There is a moment in every difficult situation where you have a choice, not a big dramatic choice, a small one, the choice between reacting and choosing, between letting whatever just happened decide who you are for the next 5 minutes, or deciding yourself who you are going to be, regardless of what just happened. Most people never notice that moment. It passes too quickly, the trigger arrives, and the reaction follows. So automatically, so instantly, that the space between them, where the actual choosing lives, goes completely unused. And the person who never uses that space spends their entire life being moved by other people's moods, by unexpected circumstances, by the small daily frustrations that should mean nothing, but somehow end up shaping the whole day. They are not living their life. Their life is being lived at them. But there is another kind of person, the one who has learned to occupy that space, who has built, slowly and deliberately, the specific internal discipline to meet whatever arrives from a place of genuine choice. That person is not moved easily, not because nothing affects them, because they have mastered something that most people never even attempt to master, themselves. And here is the truth the Stoics understood 2,000 years ago, more clearly than almost anyone since. The person who has mastered themselves cannot be stopped, not because life stops testing them, it does not, but because nothing external, no circumstance, no person, no unexpected turn of events, has the power anymore to determine who they become. That power belongs entirely to them. And today, we are going to look at exactly how that mastery gets built. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire that was almost never at peace, war on multiple fronts, a plague that killed millions across his territory, betrayal from people he had trusted completely, the deaths of several of his own children. By any reasonable measure, his life gave him more reasons to be shaken, to be broken, to lose himself entirely in circumstance than almost anyone in recorded history. And yet the picture that survives him, through his own private journal, never intended for anyone else to read, is of a man who remained, through nearly all of it, remarkably himself, not untouched, not cold, himself. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That sentence is not motivational decoration. It is the entire foundation of what we are discussing today. Mastery of self is not the absence of difficulty. It is the presence of something inside you that difficulty cannot reach. Let us build it. The first practice, now exactly what is actually yours. This is where mastery begins, and where most people never properly start. Because before you can master yourself, you have to know clearly what yourself actually includes. Epictetus made this the very first teaching in his entire philosophy. Some things are up to us, some things are not. Your judgments, your choices, your effort, your response. These are yours completely. Other people's opinions of you, the outcome of your efforts, what happens to your reputation, your health, your circumstances, these are not yours, not fully, not in the way you might assume. Most people live as though the second category belongs to them too. They try to control what other people think. They try to guarantee outcomes that were never guaranteed to anyone. They attach their entire sense of self to things that were always, from the beginning, outside their reach. And every time reality does not cooperate with that illusion, they experience it as a personal defeat. But the person building genuine self-mastery does something different. They sort, honestly and repeatedly, what is actually theirs from what never was. And they pour their full effort, their full attention, their full energy into the first category only. This alone changes everything. Because the moment you stop fighting for control over things that were never yours to control, an enormous amount of energy becomes available. Energy that used to be spent in frustration, in anxiety, in the exhausting effort of trying to manage the unmanageable, is suddenly free. Free to be spent on the one thing that was always, fully, entirely yours, yourself, the second practice. Find the space between what happens and what you do. This is the practice we opened with, and it deserves a closer look, because it is genuinely the hinge on which everything else turns. Between a trigger and a reaction, there is a gap. It is often tiny, a fraction of a second, sometimes less, but it is always there. And in that gap, before the reaction fires, a different kind of response becomes possible. Marcus Aurelius called the part of the mind that lives in that gap the ruling faculty, the observer, the chooser, the part of you that is not the anger, not the fear, not the impulse, but the one watching all of it arise and deciding what to do next. Most people never strengthen this faculty because they never practice using it. The trigger comes, and the response follows instantly, unexamined, automatic, but the gap can be trained, like a muscle, small moment by small moment, the mildly irritating comment, the frustrating delay, the minor disappointment. Each one is an opportunity, small, unremarkable, easy to miss, to practice pausing, just for a breath, just for 3 seconds, long enough for the reactive mind to step back and the choosing mind to step forward. And here is what happens to a person who practices this consistently, over months, over years. The gap gets wider, not because the triggers get smaller, because the ruling faculty gets stronger, until eventually, even in genuinely difficult moments, the moments that would once have completely overtaken them, there is still a gap, still a space to choose from, still a version of themselves, present and available. Even under real pressure, that is not luck, that is a skill, built through repetition, exactly like any other. The third practice, stop needing the world to agree with you. This practice addresses one of the most common and most quietly draining sources of a person's instability, the need for external agreement. Most people, without fully realizing it, have outsourced a significant portion of their sense of self to the opinions of others. They feel good when praised and diminished when criticized. They second-guess decisions the moment someone raises an eyebrow. They adjust subtly and constantly to keep the room comfortable with them, even at the cost of their own honest judgment. And a person built that way, moved by the shifting winds of other people's opinions, can never be genuinely stable, because the winds never stop shifting. Epictetus offered a specific, practical correction. Never depend on the admiration of others, not because admiration is bad to receive, but because depending on it hands your stability to people who were never asked to be responsible for it. The person building genuine self-mastery makes a different kind of peace. They form their own honest judgment, based on their own values, their own careful thinking. And they hold that judgment with a settled kind of confidence. Not stubbornness, not arrogance. Simply the quiet steadiness of someone who has done the work of thinking it through and does not need external confirmation to trust the conclusion. This does not mean ignoring genuine feedback. It means no longer being at the mercy of every passing opinion. And that distinction between genuine openness to feedback and dependency on approval is one of the clearest markers of a person who has begun to master themselves. The fourth practice, meet discomfort on purpose. Before it meets you, this is the practice that builds actual resilience rather than the mere appearance of it. Because here is an uncomfortable truth. A person who has never chosen discomfort voluntarily has no real evidence that they can handle it when it arrives uninvited. Their confidence, if they have any, is untested. It exists only in theory. The Stoics practice something specific to correct this: voluntary discomfort, the deliberate choice, made regularly and on purpose, of the harder option. Not because the harder option is enjoyable, but because choosing it builds something the easier option never can. Evidence, real, lived, personal evidence that difficulty is survivable, that it can be met, worked through, and come out the other side of. Seneca practiced this directly. Periods of simple food, plain clothing, deliberately reduced comfort, not out of asceticism for its own sake, but as training. A reminder to himself that his peace of mind did not actually depend on comfort being present, that he could function, and function well without it. The modern version of this practice does not need to be extreme. The cold shower when a warm one would be easier, the difficult conversation faced directly rather than avoided, the hard task done first rather than deferred to later. Each one, small as it may seem, is a deposit into the same account, evidence that you can meet difficulty and remain yourself. And the person who has made enough of those deposits meets the difficulty life eventually brings uninvited. Not with panic, but with a kind of quiet recognition. I have done hard things before. I can do this too. That recognition, built through repeated voluntary practice, is the actual foundation of resilience. Not confidence borrowed from motivational words. Confidence earned through lived experience. The fifth practice. Examine yourself honestly, every single day. This is the practice that ties everything else together and keeps the mastery from becoming stagnant or self-congratulatory. Marcus Aurelius wrote his private journal not to record his achievements, but to examine his failures. Where did I lose myself today? Where did I react instead of choose? Where did I let someone else's opinion move me more than it should have? Where did I avoid something I should have faced directly? This daily honest examination is uncomfortable, and that discomfort is precisely the point, because self-mastery is not a state you arrive at and then simply possess forever. It is a practice, renewed daily, through honest attention to where you actually fell short. Not to punish yourself, but to see clearly and adjust. The person who skips this practice tends to drift, slowly, without noticing, back into old automatic patterns, the reaction instead of the response, the need for approval instead of settled confidence, the avoidance instead of the voluntary discomfort. But the person who returns every evening to this honest self-examination catches the drift early, corrects it, begins again the next morning, slightly more aware than the day before. 10 minutes. 3 honest questions. Where did I do well today? Where did I fall short? What will I do differently tomorrow? That is the entire practice. To describe, genuinely difficult to sustain, and genuinely transformative over months and years for the person who does. So here are the 5 practices. Know exactly what is actually yours to control. Behind the space between what happens and what you do. Stop needing the world to agree with you. Meet discomfort on purpose before it meets you. Examine yourself honestly every single day. 5 practices, none of them dramatic, none of them requiring anything you do not already have access to. All of them built slowly, through daily repetition, not through a single decision made once and never revisited. And here is what they build, together, over time. A person who cannot be easily moved. Not because life stops testing them. It will not, but because the testing no longer has the power it once did, because the mastery has shifted from the outside world into the one place it was always meant to live. Inside, Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one not someday. Not once circumstances finally cooperate, today, in the next small choice, in the next gap between trigger and response, in the next moment where the easy reaction is available, and the harder chosen response is also available. And you decide, deliberately, which one gets to define you. That is where mastery actually lives, not in grand declarations, in small, repeated, daily choices, accumulating quietly into something that eventually cannot be shaken by very much at all. Master yourself first. Everything else, the strength, the stability, the sense that nothing in this world can genuinely stop you, follows from there, not before. If this gave you something worth starting today, share it with someone who is still being moved by things that were never worth that much power over them. Scoos for new Stoic wisdom every single week.